Kansas City didn't begin with skyscrapers or highways. It began with geography, with a river, trade routes, and a location that eventually turned into one of the most important logistical hubs in America. My name is JJ Sanchez, and this is Behind the Brick, the making of Kansas City, brought to you by GKW Group. Each episode, we'll sit down with contractors, architects, developers, historians, and community leaders who have played a role in Kansas City's past and who are helping shape its future. Because to understand where Kansas City is going, we first have to understand what it was built on. For our first episode, there's no better place to start than the river itself. Today, I'm joined by Jon Stephens, the president of Port KC. Jon, thank you for being here.
Glad to be here.
To start simple, why here? Why did people stop in Kansas City?
Well, this was an indigenous center for thousands of years. It's the crossroads of North America before there was an America. And then Lewis and Clark identified they visited this area in 1804, stopped right literally feet from where we are on this riverfront. They documented that this would be a great center for this, for building a metropolis in the new expanding America. And from there, business and industry saw that advantage, and here we are today.
I love that. I love thinking back to some of the first settlers in Kansas City and the impact that it had on the city's earliest growth.
No, that's a great thing because we are truly a river city. However, the Missouri River and the Mississippi River, the whole system is it's almost 1/4 of North America. It's one of the largest river systems in the world. And it is the reason Kansas City grew with trade and commerce and people. However, once the railroads came in, they were a great addition, but we built the Hannibal Bridge, crossed the river, and then Kansas City really turned its back and kind of forgot that we were a river city for more than a century. It's where we dumped things. It's where we put factories. And the city built away from our river, and we're here to reclaim it because it's special.
Yeah. Would you say that's where Westport really started to develop and then kind of came back to the river? Or?
Yeah, so, Westport was part of the trading posts and the wagon trails, west and to California and then the western expansion. But then right here also, we had the town of Kansas. It was a small little kind of competing town to Westport, to this big metropolis of Westport. And St. Joseph, Missouri was another. There was a time where St. Joe was 10 times bigger than Kansas City.
Really?
And it was considered the next great city in this region. And then we built a bridge, and then we embraced railroads, water, and the whole transportation center, and Kansas City took off. So then Westport and the town of Kansas grew together to really become Kansas City as we know it.
What is something that people often misunderstand about the origin of Kansas City?
Wow, that's a really great question because I think there's a lot of things that people miss. I think people think, one, that Kansas City was always kind of destined to be this big city here in the Midwest. I think they also miss that it wasn't. It was a competitive endeavor. It wasn't always destined to be this place. And then they miss that we grew up around a lot of different things. We grew up around agriculture and manufacturing and immigration, and all of these things kind of factored into this wonderful concoction that makes Kansas City and kind of gives us our heritage. Everything, from the things that everyone talks about, like jazz and barbecue, that was because of the stockyards and because of the river and the riverboats bringing people from New Orleans and St. Louis and Louisiana to blend all that music together to create Kansas City jazz. I don't think people really realize that. They think it kind of was maybe always here. It wasn't always here.
Yeah. It's fun to think about, the redevelopment of Kansas City now and how some of those things are starting to really get highlighted and being brought back to life. We love that.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, we're excited that, we are a creative city. We're a city of industry, and I think we can have that, and we need to embrace that heritage while we do it in our own unique modern way, too.
At what point do you think Kansas City became a true logistical hub?
Really from the beginning. I mean, honestly, Kansas City was a logistics center in its own interesting way. I mean, literally from the French fur trappers before there was even America here. When this was still part of France, there were fur trapping outposts here, and then. Then you had early settlers coming in. But even before that, as I mentioned, you had the Native Americans and indigenous populations that would move through these areas, the Missouri River, the Kansas River, and they would camp and hunt and move through these areas. It was always kind of a place where they would gather, they would trade goods and services. So we just continue to change the narrative on that while still embracing that we're the crossroads of this whole great region. And we have to continue to say we're the crossroads just in a modern way. Now it's airports and railroads and technology. But man, if we know where we come from, we can learn where we're going.
When people look at Kansas City, what remnants are hiding in plain sight?
Wow, there are so many. If you look at, we've built levees to protect, most of the city from flooding and all of these things. But you go down to the Town of Kansas pedestrian bridge, just right down the road. You go for a run, go for a walk your dog, whatever. You go down there. If you look down right along the shoreline, you'll see some limestone sticking out right by the water line. Mm-hmm. That was the original docks that were natural docks. It was the original limestone outcroppings on the river where the canoes would dock, and then later boats would dock, and then later barges would dock. That was right there. And then under the Town of Kansas Bridge, you can't really see it. You got to look close, but you'll see the foundations of the original Town of Kansas, the Coates House Hotel, the things that were built right there when that was truly first in Maine. There's still the foundations there. And then, further out by 435 and 71 in the Hickman Mills area, you can still see the swales from all the Western wagon trains in the dirt. There's these deep trenches you can see on satellite photos that were so many wagons came through here going west that you can see it.
That's fascinating. I'm going to have to go by there right after this.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible.
I know you and I have kind of talked about this a little bit before, but where do you think we get our Kansas City kindness from? I mean, I know you talk about the crossroads and you talk about people traveling west. I think that's kind of one of the hidden things that people don't really realize, but where do you think it comes from?
As a Kansas City native, I've debated that a lot, right? And I think I've come to the conclusion that you had a lot of these places that were kind of those westward boom towns, right? These places that kind of took off because of oil or because of gold or because of whatever. Kansas City was one of those, right? I mean, it grew fast, but it was also always a mixing ground. It was a mix of Northerners, Southerners, of immigrants, of different immigrant groups. I believe in KCK, right over on the hill across from us, at one point there were 13 different Catholic churches in Strawberry Hill, all different cultures. So same religion, but different cultures. There was Croatian and Irish and Italian and on and on and on. So to me, the KC kindness evolved from necessity, that when all these cultures are blending, if we were going to come together and grow a new place where we can all succeed and thrive, we had to be nice and we had to get along with each other, because if otherwise we were going to be having duels in the streets and shootouts and everything else. So we kind of evolved that. And then I think, we are a city of food, and we're a city of music, and we're a city of art. And those always lead, I think, to collaboration, friendship, and kindness, honestly.
No, absolutely. I read not too long ago about the different immigrants that built the different areas, and it explains a lot about having the Italian culture in the Northeast and Irish that actually started in the West Side, and how that kind of transitioned over into the Hispanic culture now that we see. So it's amazing to really see that evolution over time, that we're and to think that we're going to have the World Cup here, and within less than a month, it's going to be amazing to kind of relive that sense of culture that we started with.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the World Cup is a chance to kind of remind ourselves that we are a global community. We're a global city.
Yeah.
And we're a city where all of us came from somewhere, and we all came from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it's a chance to do that. You mentioned Columbus Park and some of these neighborhoods. It's amazing. I personally love that they've evolved from culture to culture to culture, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, the West Side was an Irish and Scotch settlement, then it became Hispanic, and it's kind of continues to evolve. And Independence Avenue, I love, you look at the churches and it's like, what was that church originally? Like, who built that church? Right. And now, but then there's a new generation using it in their own way and telling their own stories. Man, I mean, that's powerful, and it's exciting.
It's exciting. I love it. For people who are unfamiliar with Port KC, could you explain a little bit about your guys' role in the city and what you guys are really taking part of?
First, I like to say, yes, we have a port authority in Kansas City, and that's okay. People need to learn that we are, again, a goods movement community, and Port KC is a little bit different. We are, in one way, we are a state-enabled authority. We don't receive tax dollars, but we're a public agency. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, our goal is to grow the economy of Kansas City. Mm-hmm. So we exist to promote trade, growth, and even housing. I mean, I just read earlier that Kansas City, Missouri alone is growing by more than 5,000 new population a year now. And so we need housing, we need workforce, we need quality places for people to work, people to live, and people to experience. So we operate kind of at that nexus of all of those things. We work on redevelopment. We work a lot in industrial and manufacturing with partners. But we're really kind of this interesting thing. I like to say that if we have the ability to identify a problem and help bring partners together to help solve it, that's where we operate. So it's a team. I'm very lucky to have this incredible team of 25 professionals that are finance people, development experts, urban planners, marketing people, and lawyers. And so they come to work every day passionate to improve our community. And right outside the window, you can see probably the most visible example of Berkeley Riverfront, but the work is partnership all over Kansas City.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys have done a great job of taking advantage of the opportunity that was there, and I think everybody really appreciates your team for it.
We do try to solve problems and get ahead of problems. We see other cities that, dig themselves into holes with housing or dig themselves into holes with affordability or cost. Our goal is to try to anticipate, help, and support getting ahead of some of those things so Kansas City can grow for the benefit of everybody.
Yeah. What kind of opportunities do you think Kansas City hasn't fully realized yet? Are there any opportunities there that we're still kind of, we're figuring out step by step how to get there, or are there any that are kind of in a forward sight?
Yeah, it's really great. I think having watched and studied a lot of the history of Kansas City, historically we've always, as a city, we've basically said okay, when things start growing too much, we get a little nervous, and there's a little bit of this sort of Midwest self-deprecation, kind of well, maybe we shouldn't be the next boom town. Maybe we should dial it back, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the reality is that we're starting to break this mold now, is break the mold and say, no, we deserve to grow. We deserve to have entrepreneurs. We deserve to have a modern airport terminal. We deserve these things as a city. And so we're bound and determined to make them happen. And I think that's the biggest one for me, is Kansas City viewing itself as positively as the rest of the world. And I think we're there. And now for me, it's how do we continue to make sure that happens? How do we continue? Everybody's wearing KC stuff and promoting, we're the only place that dresses like tourists in our own hometown, man. And I love it. But that's great. And, I bring at least one KC item everywhere I go in the world. I mean, I had people stop me in Tokyo on a run because I was wearing a Royals jersey, right? Mm-hmm. And I love that. Yeah. But we have to continue to believe in ourselves and continue to push to do it and not say, oh, well, we've done the World Cup, we've done this, we're good now. Right. Being good is never good.
Yeah, it's interesting when we think about, as a community, how do we stay humble and continue to grow? Relating it to the Chiefs, right? We had the boom of the Chiefs and having all the success, and then kind of coming around to a little bit where people were getting a little bit too cocky, and it's like, hey, let's slow down a little bit. Let's realize where our feet are, and then take a good step forward. I always like ending these conversations with a little bit of perspective. But when thinking about Kansas City, what are some things that you think we have to protect, or things that we can't lose?
Man, there's a lot we have to protect. I think we have to protect our small businesses. We've got to continue to support them, believe in them, continue. We have to protect our neighborhoods and our green spaces and our parks. And it doesn't mean leave them the way they are, but it means think consciously. You mentioned how do you stay humble versus bragging. I think we could be wildly successful, but if we practice a servant leader mentality, and if we perpetuate a servant leader mentality through our community, we can be thriving and driving, but still be humble.
For someone who truly wants to understand Kansas City, especially a lot of folks are about to be here in the next month, where do you think they should start looking?
Well, the self-serving person in me says, come to the riverfront, man. Yeah, right. Come to Berkeley Riverfront. But no, I would say get on the streetcar. Yeah. Like wherever you're staying, wherever you're visiting, man, there are great places. There are great places out in Olathe. There are great places out east. There's so much. But if you really want to get a feel for who we are, where we are, pick a spot on the streetcar and just ride it up and down and get off and walk 6 blocks in either direction of that streetcar line. And you're going to see people, cultures, food, shopping. You're going to see it all. And you're going to see Westport. You're going to see the Plaza. You're going to see UMKC. You'll see, and now you'll see the riverfront too, right? Mm-hmm. You ride it all the way down here and get off, and you have miles of trails and places to really see where we started and to see a river unlike any other.
Jon, I appreciate the conversation, and I think this is a perfect place to start. For people understanding a little bit more about Kansas City. The biggest reason we wanted to start this podcast was just the simple fact that Kansas City is growing so much, and to be able to highlight the history of Kansas City, how we got to this point, is I think it's important. I think it's important for everybody in the community and people working in the community, playing in the community, and just taking part of its growth to understand the history.
You're a believer in Kansas City. That comes through, and obviously I think people know. I'm not shy about being an unabashed supporter of this city, and so it's excited to have those conversations.
And for everyone listening, this is just the beginning. We'll continue to explore the people, the projects, and the stories that built Kansas City to what it is. Thank you for joining us. This is Brick by Brick, the making of Kansas City.